Hey, and welcome to another interior real estate photography tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at lighting different situations, challenging situations. This house, it posed a few challenges that I don't come across a lot. It was super harsh sunlight coming in on the east side. It was about, actually it was right at 12 noon. So we're talking fall. So the house was almost like at a 45-degree angle, super bright coming in, like the perfect angle to where on the east side of the house that was super bright. So it was like really hard to control and tame that. But again, this is where I'm going to show you how you can still shoot with lights off, and you can shoot with only one speed light. I was running with just the Godox V1 for this shoot. So I'm going to show you how I edit everything. So what I do is I'm shooting on the Micro Four Thirds system, the EM1 Mark II, with that Leiwa 7.5 millimeter. If you full frame folks, that is a 15 millimeter. And that's where, if you do shoot on that lens, make sure that your profile is set down here to Venus Optics and then use the Leiwa 15 millimeter f2.0. I always thought for the longest time that it was the OOWA, which I thought just a model misprint, or maybe, yeah. I always thought it was this one, the OOWA model, which is not. It makes sure you're coming down here to Venus Optics. So that was just a helpful tip to help me. Hopefully it helps somebody that actually uses that lens, because what it does is it gets rid of that vignetting in the barrel distortion, or the distortion that lens has. So I always thought the lens vignetted, and it really doesn't. It's just that I didn't have the right profile on there. So it really makes it pop and gets those lines perfect, because it's supposed to be a zero distortion lens from how they market it. So, and it is. I mean, we're shooting pretty wide, and those door frames stay nice and straight up and down. So anyway, here we have a super bright blown out bathroom. This is like the double-sided vanity here with the shower and the toilet in here. And so what I did was I just shot a natural a light, trying not to expose this one too much, and then I popped a flash. So I'm always trying to pop a flash with my ambient layer just to get a little bit more color, a little bit more of that daylight color into the room every time. So that's what I do, and it's toned down. It's maybe about 16th power on the Godox V1. So then what I did was I brought the exposure down, made sure I wasn't blowing this window out, and then I popped a flash, and then I came around the corner here behind the door and popped a flash so I could light this room. And yes, I will do with my foot right there. I knew it wasn't going to be a big deal because we can always delete that out. So what I'm going to do is highlight all these three and bring them into Photoshop. Alright, so once they're in Photoshop, we have that ambient layer, that nice bright layer on top. And then this one, so I want to shut this one off and then deal with just these two. So what I like to do is I take the far room one, bring that up to the top just underneath that ambient layer, and I'm going to turn this to lighten mode. So that almost gets rid of my foot there. So when I do go ahead and turn on this, we can basically paint in. I'm going to create a layer mask, leaving it white, make sure black is selected over here. And I'm using my right bracket on my keyboard. The left and right brackets are to the right of the letter P. And again, at least they are on a Mac. And I'm just going to slowly just paint this in. Notice my flow is at 3%. I really have a really low flow that way. It's just subtle changes. And I'm just going to lightly brush over this glare on the floor. And to me, that looks about done. I might take and drop this to luminosity mode. Let's see. Yep, that does help. Again, I use luminosity mode every single time, and the only reason where it wouldn't necessarily work is if you don't have enough light, or you have too many shadows on your layer underneath, and you'll get that yellowish, the yellow shadow look, which is really hard to get rid of. So just be mindful of that. Watch your shadows on your flash layers. That'll help your when you go to turn that ambient layer into luminosity mode, that it blends well and it looks good. So we're just saving this, bringing it back into Lightroom. I'm going to do my final bump. Some of you have been asking, what do I do on my final bump? Really what I'm doing is I bump the contrast, and you can basically copy this if you want and then tweak it later on, but contrast is at plus 13, highlights is at negative 73, and again, this is just playing around. You can tweak that. I just moved it to negative 51, so you're going to have to tweak it every photo really quickly. Bump the shadows just a little bit. Drop those blacks. I love that punch, rich, contrasty look. I bring the clarity up a little bit. Maybe bring the vibrance up plus 5 or 6. And that's it. Oh, and then I hit my verticals down here. And that's it. So I'm just giving it another little punch from, you know, when I bring it back in from Photoshop. So, and then I just flag it by hitting the top left, the keyboard or the keystroke to the left of the number 1 there at the very top. And then we move on. Let's go on to another bedroom shot. So really nice. We got nice even lighting, but again, I'm popping that flash off just above the camera just to light the foreground a little bit. We're going to paste in my settings. And this is like really what I do is, again, drop those highlights. I'm trying to make that ambient layer look as nice and clean as possible. Typically, I'm using auto white balance. Well, I always use auto white balance when I'm doing photos for real estate, but then I just use as shot. So sometimes you'll find out that if your auto white balance didn't work, go try auto. And again, if the camera got it right, pretty much as shot and auto is going to be the same. Sometimes, depending on the situation, auto fixes it really quickly, better than if I could do the white picker on the ceiling or whatever. So yeah, that helped. I mean, a little bit too blue for my taste. So, and again, you can always manually do it. That's why I like shooting the lights off. You have a nice white balance. It's usually 5 to 55 or 48 to 5500 Kelvin is usually where I notice the white balance staying. So I'm going to place the number 1 here. We're going to have to do a composite with this because I didn't want to blow the windows out. And we're pasting my settings in again. And that looks good. What I'm doing is just looking at, can I blend these windows in from the from the ambient layer. So I mark that as 1, so I know I can highlight both these, bring these into Photoshop. And again, this is my method for 95% of my listing shoots. I like to turn, let's get that correct color, luminosity mode, cleans up that color cast, and we're going to come down here, just create a layer mask. We're just going to work on the windows because everything else looks decent. And we're just going to brush in those bright spots at that 3% flow. And you know, it is so nice to be able to just use that Godox V1, and I have it on a belt clip. And so I just clip it onto my belt, and I'm able to pull it off my belt and throw it up to the ceiling, pop a flash real quick, and slap it back on my belt, grab my tripod, and move to the next location. So I'm just going to flatten this real quick. Command S to save it. Again, doing that interior final bump. Anybody can create a preset, super duper easy. Now, if it looks like you got some color casts and you don't know exactly what color it is, I like to take the saturation, bring it all the way up, and then you can see, come down here to your hue, saturation, luminance, and click on this little guy right here. And then you're just going to click anywhere where the color is bleeding through and just pull down until it looks right. So it's pulling the yellows and oranges out. Then if you come back and double click on your saturation, you can see that it definitely cleared that up. So if we turn that, oh whoops, if we do the eyeball on and off, you can see that it got rid of that color cast. You don't have to go too crazy. Maybe I'll bring those back up. I used to make a preset where it did kill the oranges and yellows, but just be mindful that a lot of times you will have that color, orange and yellow, coming through sometimes. And your greens from the foliage outside and the blues from the light. Again, I'm just bumping the shadows again. Let's bump that contrast up a little bit more. There we go. I'm going to flag it. Let's move on. And again, I pop that flash up over, just to light it. And so we'll paste our settings in. It should give me a nice bright image. And this is one where I didn't even care. I just brought that flash up maybe a half power or so and just shot it at the windows. I want to see if this one was any brighter. Yeah, this one, so notice the difference. This one, we're not going to be able to do luminosity mode. I'll show you. We're going to bring both these in. So I just went really low and shot it up at the window so it really kind of hides that ceiling fan. And I do see harsh shadows here. That's going to probably be an issue. As opposed to this one, which, you know what, let's just bring them all in. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So it will matter depending on what flash layer you have underneath your ambient layer for when you switch ambient to luminosity. So I will show you right now. What do we have? So we just have this base layer. So if we just turn this to luminosity mode, we should be okay. But if we were to move this one up, notice the shadows. Not actually as bad as I thought it was going to be, but what about this one? Okay, let's see. Alright. You can definitely see some orange shadows on there, but you know what? It's not actually as bad as I thought it was going to be, so we're just going to leave it. So we can highlight our ambient layer, create a layer mask, black is selected, and now let's just slowly paint back in those windows. I'm going to paint right over the TV, give it a nice black look. I try not to do window or TV replacements in every single situation. It just takes so much time. And sometimes it's just not necessary. You know, that's where you really got to learn to, it's not like you're cutting corners, but you're really just trying to produce higher images at a fast pace. Especially when you start getting busy, you're going to need to be able to do fast turnover. Otherwise, you're going to be working around the clock to get stuff done. And notice that shadow right here. And just paint it back in. Disappears. There we go. Okay, and again, just doing my interior final bump. Look at how nice and bright and clean that looks. Again, watch your histogram. I'm going to bring mine just a little bit back so it's right of center, so it's not super bright. That way you know, no matter what your monitor is doing or what environment you're in, if you watch your histogram, you'll know you'll be consistent as long as every histogram, every image, the histogram is pointing just that right of center. It'll be consistent brightness throughout. And, oops, I don't need to flag that image. And that's it for this listing, folks. I highly suggest that you just practice, watch these tutorials over again. And again, if you're just getting into the business, you only need to buy one flash. And I teach you how to shoot real estate using only one flash. And a lot of times, that's all I need. So again, thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button. We'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye-bye.